Okay. Happy test review day, guys. So we're going to be talking about the 2.3 test review. So this is, again, basically just a version of the test. Okay. So today I'm going to run through an entire version of the test. So if you're struggling at all with this unit, watch the whole video. I'm going to go through all the problems, and it's going to be just like the test you are going to see when you take the test on this unit. With absolute value inequalities. Remember, guys, absolute value you split into two equations. With inequalities, you're splitting into two inequalities, right? Instead of it being like one number is this far away from zero and this number is this far away from zero, it's this range of numbers, okay? So that's where the inequality part comes into play. So we're actually going to turn these into what is going to become compound inequalities. So again, they're either going to go opposite directions or they're going to meet in the middle when you do these. So let's go through some examples and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So with these absolute value inequalities, we get the absolute value all by itself, and if we got a positive number over here, which we will, because we didn't do any of the no solutions or any of the special cases with this unit. If you have the absolute value all by itself, then you split it into two different inequalities. So this is a little bit different than with equations. So because the direction part here. So you'd have x, like here, the absolute value is by itself, right? So we're going to split it. With the positive version, you just basically write it just like it was. But with the negative version, and when it's -2, that's basically like dividing by -2. And with inequalities, when you divide by a negative, or dividing by -1, sorry. When you divide by a negative to each side, it flips the sign, right? So when you rewrite these, this negative inequality is going to have the sign flipped the other direction. So here it's eating the x, here it's eating the number. So right here we have our solved inequalities. There wasn't anything else we needed to do on this problem. So we would graph it. Remember, this is a number line, so it has to go in numeric order. -2 would come first, and then +2. And these have the line underneath, so it'd be a closed circle. And at 2, it's eating the variable, so it's going to go to the right. At -2, it's eating the numbers, so it's going to go to the left. Okay? There is a quick way to tell which ways it's going to go before you even start. If you have the absolute value isolated, and it's greater, like it's eating the variable, it's going to go opposite directions. If it's eating the number when the absolute value is isolated, it's going to meet in the middle. That's kind of just a quick rule of thumb if you wanted to remember that. Okay, so with this, there's two different intervals, right? So the least number on this first interval is -infinity. The next least is -2. So -2 would have a bracket because it's got a closed circle, and then you put a u in between, and you get a bracket to infinity, parenthesis. Okay, not too bad, right? Here we have a 6 outside the absolute value, so the first thing I'm going to do before I even start is I'm going to divide each side by 6. So I got to isolate the absolute value. So I divide each side by 6, and I'm going to switch to a pen so you guys can see this a little bit better. Got a little bit of a glare here. So divide by 6, and that's going to leave me the absolute value of x is less than or equal to 6. Now the absolute value is by itself, so I split it. X is going to be less than or equal to 6. And then with the -1, I flip the sign, and x is greater than or equal to -6. So then I graph it. -6 comes first numerically, right? And these are both closed circles. And it's greater than -6, it's less than 6. Those are going to meet in the middle. Okay? Then interval notation, the least number is -6, greatest number 6, and they would both have brackets. And that would be your answers. Okay? Not too tough, right? Let's try another one. So here, number 3. We have the 10 outside the absolute value, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the 10 to the other side. It gives me the absolute value of m is less than or equal to 7. Now the absolute value is by itself, so I'm going to split it. M is less than or equal to 7, and m is greater than or equal to -7. And then I would graph it. -7 comes first. They'd both be closed circles. and they're going to meet in the middle. It's less than 7, and it's greater than negative 7. Okay, this one, where we actually have an equation that we're going to actually split here. So the x over 6 is already isolated inside the absolute value, so there's nothing outside of it. So this is where I split it into two different inequalities. X over 6 is less than 2, and x over 6 is greater than negative 2. So two different inequalities. Now I've got to solve them. So I got to multiply each side by 6. And I'm going to get x is less than 12, and x is greater than negative 12. And then I would graph it. Negative 12 and 12. These would both be open circles. And it's less than 12, greater than negative 12. It's going to meet in the middle. Okay? And that would be... Oh, I didn't do interval notation on either of these. This one's negative 7, 7 in brackets. And this one's negative 12 and 12 in parentheses. And that would be your answers. Okay? Again, if you guys have any questions, ask your teachers. We're here to help. I'm still working here, but just again, and you can always pause and rewind this video if there's anything that confuses you. So this one, absolute value is all by itself, nothing outside the absolute value, right? So that's where we split it. Negative 3b is greater than 27. Negative 3b is less than negative 27. And then we're going to divide by negative 3 to each side. Now, you guys remember the big rule of thumb with inequalities? Anytime you divide by a negative number, you get that warning saying you need to flip the inequality sign. So these signs are going to flip around. B is less than negative 9, and B is greater than positive 9. Okay, then we would graph it. Negative 9 and 9, they'd both be open circles. It's less than negative 9, so it's going to go to the left. It's greater than 9, it's going to go to the right. So we've got those two different intervals, so we would have negative infinity to negative 9 in parentheses, u, parenthesis 9, infinity. Okay, and that would be your answers. Not too tough, right? This one, absolute value is all by itself, so we're going to split it. 4v plus 2 is less than or equal to 10, and 4v plus 2 is greater than or equal to negative 10. Okay, so we're going to minus 2 to each side. Minus 2. 4v is less than or equal to 8, and 4v is going to be greater than or equal to negative 12. Then you divide by 4, and v is going to be less than or equal to positive 2, and v is going to be greater than or equal to negative 3. So then we would graph it. Negative 3 comes first. These are both going to be closed circles. Greater than negative 3, less than 2, they're going to meet in the middle. And then the interval notation would be negative 3 and 2. That's the least number, right? 2 is the greatest number, and they'd both be in brackets because of the closed circles. Okay? Number 7. Let's look at number 7. So this one got this negative 5 out front. Remember, when it's out front of the absolute value and there's no operation here, that means it's multiplying. And we can't distribute into an absolute value, so we have to divide to get rid of it. So we're going to divide by negative 5 to each side. And you divide by negative 5, and you're going to get the absolute value of 2 minus 9x is less than or equal to, because you're going to flip the sign, positive 11. Then we split it. 2 minus 9x is less than or equal to 11. 2 minus 9x is greater than or equal to negative 11. And then we would minus 2 to each side. Gives me negative 9x is less than or equal to 9. And negative 9x is greater than or equal to negative 13. Then we would divide by negative 9 to each side. Divide by negative 9. And we're dividing by a negative, so warning, got to flip the sign. It's going to go the other direction, and x is going to be greater than or equal to -1, and x is going to be less than or equal to positive 13 over 9, which is a big decimal. So you could write 13 over 9, or it's 1.4 repeating, so you could write 1.4, probably fine, but I'm going to leave it as 13 over 9 because that's the most accurate. So we got -1 and 13 over 9. It's closed circles, and they are going to meet in the middle. So -1, 13 over 9, both in brackets, would be your interval notation. Okay. I'm guessing right here, this step is going to be the one that most of you guys forget and struggle with, the initial flip when you divide it by that -5. So don't forget to do that. Okay. Number 8, we've got this 8 outside of the absolute value. So we're going to multiply each side by 8. Gives me the absolute value of 7x plus 10 is greater than 8. So now my absolute value is isolated, so I split it. 7x plus 10 is greater than 8, and 7x plus 10 is less than -8. Then, two-step equation, going to minus the 10 first. Get rid of that add subtract first. Gives me 7x is greater than 2. 7x is less than -18. Then I would divide by 7. And these are both going to be kind of crazy decimals, so I'm going to leave them as fractions. X is greater than 2 over 7, and x is less than -18 over 7. So when we graph it, we'd have -18 over 7 and 2 over 7. They both be open circles. That's less than -18, so it's going that way. Greater than 2 over 7 going that way. So then I'd have the least number would be -infinity, then -18 over 7, then a u, and you shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it, 2, because I'm writing in pen, 2 over 7, infinity. Leave yourself enough room. Those really need to be right next to each other, or they'll be wrong, because it all has to be basically one thing. So, okay. Then, last one here. Brett has made some mistakes. We need to identify those mistakes and then solve the problem correctly. So let's look at what he did here. So the first thing he did was multiply by 10 to get rid of the 10. That's correct. So he got the absolute value by itself. Then he split it into two things. So here's his first mistake. So when he split it, he changed the sign of the n instead of 30. Because you want to change this sign right here, right? The 30 should become negative. He did flip the sign, so that's good. But he changed this n to a positive when it's the 30 that needs to become a negative. Okay? Then, next mistake is right here. Didn't flip the sign when he divided by -1. Okay, so those are the two mistakes there that he did. So let's go through and solve this correctly. So you start off by multiplying by 10, and you got 4n, absolute value. Let's just write it over here. So the absolute value of 4 minus n is greater than or equal to 30. So that part was right. He multiplied by 10, got that. Now when you split it, 4 minus n is greater than or equal to 30, and 4 minus n is less than or equal to -30. So then you would minus 4 to each side, which gives me -n is greater than or equal to 26, and -n is less than or equal to negative 34. Then you divide by the negative to each side, and you need to flip the signs when you do that. So n is less than or equal to negative 26, and n is greater than or equal to positive 34. So when you graph it, you got negative 26, positive 34. It's greater than 34, right? So it's going to go to the right. It's less than 26, so it's going to go to the left. And then you'd have negative infinity, negative 26. Parentheses always have a, or infinities always have a parenthesis. Bracket u, bracket 34, infinity. And that would be the correct answers for this problem. Okay? So, if you have any questions, let me know. Let your teacher know. We're here to help, and we'll see you out there. Good luck on the test.